So glad that you're joining us here in this session. If you were wanting to be in the building teams and leaders that build the church session, congratulations, you made it. You made it, and I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to have the wonderful pastors on either side of me introduce themselves as well. My name is Nichole Moore, and I am the campus pastor here in Tacoma for Champion Center, and I have been serving here. I've actually been attending Champion Center for 26 years. Been with Pastor Kevin since I graduated from college and moved over here. I kind of chuckled when they were talking about knowing your heartbeat of your pastor, reading their body language. I'm like, oh yeah, I know right when that hammer's gonna fall. Like, someone's in big trouble. You know, you learn those things. And I've been here attending Champion Center for 26 years. I've been on staff for about 15 of those years, and the campus pastor here for the last 8. So, and of course, wearing lots of roles and hats in between. So, but I'm not here alone. I have 2 wonderful pastors with me. How about you go first, Pastor Dan?
I'm Dan Lord from St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up in church. My mom and dad got saved in Pastor Kevin's father and mother's church. Pastor Kevin, by the way, is a St. Louis Cardinal fan for any baseball people out there. He's from St. Louis. Grew up in God's house, a little church mouse, mowed the lawn, cleaned up when the basement at the church got flooded. It was just the Lord boys. We didn't know anything but serving in God's house, and became a youth pastor and then an executive pastor and now a lead pastor in my late 40s into my early 50s now. And I got to be an intern here when I was 19 years old in 1993, 94, and mop the lobbies. So please don't spill your coffee out. There's some intern.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of concrete to mop. I'm just saying. So yeah, and I learned a lot about teams from sports. So I'll probably give some sports illustrations today.
I love that. All right, Pastor Jason.
Hey, I'm Jason Warman. I pastor Coast Life Church in Venice, Florida. So it's a horrible job, just terrible, but somebody's got to do it, and so I do it. My wife and I moved to Florida in 2009, took a church that was dwindled down to 12 people, literally 12 people, not an exaggeration. They were like a little secret terror cell for Jesus. Nobody knew they were there, but they sure did hate really well. But and we shut the church down, relaunched in 2010 as Coast Life Church, and just moved into a beautiful new building this year, and we're in a great season, praising God for what he's doing. It's amazing.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to give you our best today. We're going to kick off and maybe just share a little bit background on this topic, set up our conversation today, and then each of us are going to share a perspective that we have from our experience with building teams and leaders that build the church. And I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, why is this so important? And it goes really back to the basics of the Bible. I mean, the first thing, think about this. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who has unlimited power, what's the first thing he does when he builds his ministry? He builds a team. I mean, you could argue he could have gone solo and probably been just fine. I believe he built the team and did what he did because he was modeling for us that this is how the church is going to move forward, is to have a team. And our conference theme is 2 are better than 1. And really, individuals not leading like a team, we limit the potential that we have as individuals, and we limit the reach the church can have. Blind spots have been brought up a couple different times. And you know what's interesting about blind spots is that everyone can see your blind spot but you. You're driving down the road, the blind spots you have are only yours. The cars all around you know what's going on. And the truth of the matter is the same is true for our teams. There are people on our teams that see things about our leadership or see things that could be better. And sadly, more often than not, as a church, we get 1 or 2 people in charge. Everyone else just stays silent and doesn't offer a perspective, even on a blind spot, simply because we've gotten the message. The leader is large and in charge, and the rest of us just need to fall in line. And so we're here today to talk about how do we break down some of that, and how do we move people from attending our church, Because every week we have new guests that come in, and then over time, those guests decide they want to actually, this is my home church. I want to attend this church, to helping them be an owner of what's happening at the church, joining the team, and then going beyond that to leading the team. And that's what we're going to spend our time talking today, is the strategies on doing that. And before we do, I think it's good for us just to talk about this, and that's the reasons that most often that our teams are struggling. And if we're honest, oftentimes that's because we don't know what we're looking for in the skill set of an individual to make our teams great. Or we don't know enough people in general. We don't know how to get access to people who have the skills that could do the things that we need to have done. I don't know who can sing. I'm not gonna know who can sing just because I stand out and greet people in the lobby. We've got to have a way for us to interact with people in such a way that helps us learn what their skills are. And then oftentimes we might know people, we might know skills, but then we have no pathway, no on-ramp. I mean, if you go on the freeway, it's so frustrating when you need to get on the freeway and you're going over an overpass and there's no on-ramp. You got to keep going down the road to the next place, and the goal would be is that we would have multiple on-ramps for people to actually find their way onto team and eventually help us lead the team. I'd say the last thing that we struggle with oftentimes is a consistent coaching to help people be the right people for the team. American Idol helped us see so long ago that there are people who have perspectives of their skills that those who are coaching them do not agree with in their skills. So there's 3 things today that we're going to cover that we'd love for you to consider. If you want to build strong teams and develop strong leaders, you got to have systems, you got to have the right people, and you got to have coaching. And so, Pastor Jason, would you kick us off and just talk to us about systems of getting people on team?
Yeah, I mean, the health of the church is really determined by the health of the team. And we need to determine, first of all, like, what does health look like? How do we know if we have a healthy team culture in our church? And so I want to just talk about setting a goal that gives us some parameters, like, hey, how do we know if we're hitting the mark on whether or not we're building a team? Like, somebody serves, we got people that show up on Sundays and they make stuff happen, but how do we know if we're in a healthy place? And so one of the things that we've done at our church at Coast Life Church is just to find a metric that we're just gonna, every month, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk about and look at, as a leadership team, where we're hitting on our goal of getting people on the team. So just as a number, and I'm gonna run through some stuff quick, love to connect with you guys. We want this session to be going the whole year because we wanna be with you in building teams. And so we just decided, we came across the number, I won't go into all but it's 40%. We want 40% of our total attendance actively serving on a team. Okay, so that's our number. So if you're a church of 1,000, then we want to have 400 active members on our team. How do we define an active member? They have served within the past month, and they have some consistency in their serving. So they're not just showing up every 6 months and be like, hey, I'll serve in the kids ministry every time there is a full moon. I like, you can count on me. If it's a full moon, I'll serve the 2 Sundays after the full moon. No, this isn't people who are serving on their calendar. This is people who are serving on our schedule. Like, they're coming, they're onboarding onto a team, and they're coming alongside to help carry the weight. And I want to just talk for a minute, Ephesians 4:12. Just to give a little bit of understanding about what we're doing. And this is what Paul said. He said their responsibility, talking about the fivefold ministry, talking about really what I would describe as pastors, executive leaders. Like, their responsibility is to equip God's people to do his work and build up the church, the body of Christ. And so we need to understand that the health of the church, that the building up of the church is determined by how well leaders mobilize people to serve in God's house. Like, we build up the church by mobilizing people to get into a place of serving. And I love the name of this lab is, come on, we build teams that build God's great church. Like, that's what we do. as leaders. That's our mission. It is not to do all of the ministry and create a consumer culture of people watching professionals do ministry. That is never a kingdom model. No, we are people who empower others to get hands-on in the church and build the body of Christ, and the church gets built. So when we do 40%, by the way, we've never hit 40%. I'm just gonna confess that openly to you, because there's something that happens, and we've done this for quite a while now, is we never drop below 35%. But every time we hit 38 or 39%, you know what happens in our church? The church grows, and it messes with our ratio.
There you go.
And you know what? That's the best failure that we have in our church right now, is that new people are coming and we drop down to 35%. Now, if the church is shrinking and we're shrinking, that's wrong. But when you go to attendance and you go, hey, our church grew, okay, now we have an opportunity. There's new people in our church that we need to go, Ephesians 4:12, and mobilize them to be hands-on in the church and serve and build God's great house. And Nichole said it, I wanna reiterate it, is your church is an interstate. It's moving fast. There are people who are already in their lane. They know they probably park in the same parking spot, and they sit probably in the same row, and they found their place, and they have found relationships, they found connections, many of them have found calling, and so they're moving. And the thing that once we get inside the church, we don't realize, it's like, well, just come on in here and start serving. And what we don't realize is it's not easy to go from an outsider to an insider.
That's true.
And if church is a family, have you ever just pulled up in somebody's house and just like, hey, I'm gonna be part of your family now? You know, it's like, no, you need an invitation to be a part of the family. And so if church is an interstate and everyone has found their lane and they're moving forward, then we have to have a clear on-ramp to help people merge into church life. Because on-ramps are the most brilliant invention, okay? Interstate, how are people gonna get there? You're gonna like jump your car off an overpass and just kind of, climb up out of a ditch and get run over by the semi that's already up to speed. No, we have to get up to speed and get to where we're going, and everyone has to find their place. And so we take something that we systemize. There's a resource on the Team Church website that we make available. It's part of our ecosystem. It's called Church Essentials, and it'll be available to you if you need resources to get an assimilation process going. I realize today there's a wide range of people. Some of you may have an assimilation process. People refer to it as growth track. We call ours starting point, as I was just like, hey, where do we want people to start at our church? We're just gonna define a point. This is starting point. Start here, and we're gonna help get you merged into the life of our church. But here's whatever you call it, you need a clear assimilation process. The greatest team building tool that you have, that you can have, is a clear assimilation process. Here's the second piece of it, is it needs to be a consistent process. You can't just it's gotta have some intentionality to it. So we run first 3 Sundays of every month, the same services. It is going to run rain or shine. If there's one person in the room, if there's 30 people in the room, we are not letting who wants to be in there dictate our mission. Our mission is to lead people into abundant life in Christ, and that includes serving in God's house. And so we're gonna systemize that. And so you have to have the on-ramp. And then the assimilation process will have a couple of gaps in it. I don't know if I think we have a slide that shows the assimilation.
Process of assimilation. There it is.
There we go. Okay, so we want to take somebody, they come into our church as a guest, they start to attend regularly, okay? So we want to invite them into Church Essentials, and then from Church Essentials, we're gonna get them planted on the team. I want to just pause and say, do not put people on your team that God has not planted in your church. If they want to bypass making a commitment to join your church, they are not qualified
to be a part of God's church in serving, we have to make sure, like just throwing people on a team and hoping that's gonna work out. No, we want people, come on, to get planted in God's house, put roots down, find out who we are. And so Church Essentials is gonna help people get caught up, and then we're gonna plant them on the team. The first gap that you're gonna come to is getting people to move from attendance to Church Essentials. And we've hit that gap over the years. And here's what I would tell you is you have to talk about it until you're tired of talking about it. And I feel bad for the people that I know. We have people that come every Sunday. They've been a part of our church for years. And every Sunday, we are going to talk about starting point. And it's like, well, we all know starting point. Yeah, but the person who just walked in doesn't know about starting point. And I want to tell you this, the slow death of a church is an inward focus. I know that church is about Jesus, and I know that it's about resourcing the body of Christ, but if you only get inwardly focused and you forget about that there is a world that is trying to get into your church, it's a slow demise that takes place. And so every Sunday, come on, let's have an eye on the harvest and say, God is sending people, let's get them planted into the church. And so one of the things, I'll just share something we struggled with is like we weren't getting the people into what we call starting point. And we realized that we were only targeting first-time guests. The communication, it was a small communication tweak. And we just started to say it this way. Hey, whether you've been at Coast Life Church for five minutes or you've been here for 5 years, your next step is starting point and finding your place in God's house. And it's incredible. It's just an invitation because there are people that have been sitting, they've been checking it out, they've been looking, and we need as leaders to lead them in getting planted. The second gap is on the other side of Church Essentials. And that is once they go, they complete three weeks, they're a part of the process, 4 weeks, whatever the assimilation process is. We can't assume that just because they went to that assimilation process that they're automatically just gonna land on a team. And so we would get people through, and then there would be a big gap. There wouldn't be a proper handoff. And so we worked hard to create a spreadsheet. We track who's week 1, week 2, week 3 through starting point. It gets color coded when they go through starting point as to where they're at, because they're gonna have a shadow experience. They're gonna receive a playbook for the team that they're getting on. There is gonna be a proper handoff from the Next Steps team to the team lead or the coordinator of the team that they are getting on, and it doesn't turn green until they are actively serving in God's house. And so we need a process, but here's what we realize is we don't just need a process, you also have to pastor people through the process. Like we've got to be hands-on in making sure that people get passed off. It's not like the assimilation team goes, hey, we did our job, good luck with you doing your job. No, we're gonna make sure that person doesn't fall through the gap. We worked too hard to get them in the door, and God has moved on their heart, and now they've been planted in our church. We're gonna make sure they find their place on God's team. And so it's the last gap to that, and we get them planted. And so you need a process, but don't forget to pastor people through the process. Just because we put something on a piece of paper doesn't mean somebody's gonna land in a healthy way on the team. And then here's the thing the last thing I would share with you is we need to set a standard for our church. What does spiritual health look like? What does that look like? Does it look like just coming to church and watching what's going on? Does spiritual health look like just consuming? And I'm talking to a room full of teams and leaders, and so I know that you guys, you get this. But just because we're doing it, we need to set a standard. Listen, no, the standard for Christianity is we look like Jesus and we serve people and we serve God's great church. That's what the spiritual standard, and spiritual health does it. Listen, I'm thankful for everybody that comes, proud to minister. We'll lead worship. We'll preach strong for everybody who walks in the door. But that is not spiritual health. Spiritual health is finding your place in God's house, and it's sitting one and it's serving one. That's what we defined as a standard. Hey, we're gonna sit a service. We're gonna be ministered to. We're gonna worship. We're gonna do our part. We're gonna give our offering. We're gonna stand together with the church. And then when I've done that, I'm gonna get out of my seat, let somebody else sit there, and I'm gonna serve them as they enter into the presence of God. That's what spiritual health looks like. And as leaders, we need to define it. We need to define it for our church. Heidi and I defined it for our children. We're like, hey, this is the standard for your life. If this is what we're saying the standard is for our church, then our kids, as soon as they're old enough to serve, they sit one, they serve one, because I believe that's a recipe for spiritual success. I am fed and I go pour out into somebody else's life, and it fosters spiritual health in my life.
I love that. That's so good. Moving on from we had joining the team into leadership development, being a leader at the church is different than being a person serving on a team.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we get so desperate, we're just looking for the person who shows up the most often, and you must be the leader that I have been looking for.
Oh boy.
But in fact, you just mentioned something that was so important. You said, excuse me, there has to be standards or benchmarks, whatever the word you use to describe spiritual health. And the same would be true for leadership health. We have standards, and we again, Pastor Jason referenced earlier that ecosystem that and the website for the team church. I really recommend that you go there. If you want the nitty-gritty details, if you're the detail person in the room, we're going to give you the surface level for some of this, but you can get all of that information there because we do have qualifiers. We have qualifiers that are leadership essentials. These are the 4 areas where you have to, you get measured. You have targets. You're growing in these areas, and because I think it's important that we know that there's a differentiation between somebody joining the team and then someone actually leading the team, and there should be some type of leadership development process for them to go through so that you have the confidence to know that they're aligned with you. Pastor Kevin has shared our story at Champion Center in 2020. There were people we would have considered leaders that had been in our church, some of them for over 20 years. And when the world turned upside down, so did ours. And it was quite shocking who you thought like you did, believed like you did, was fully aligned with scripture like we were. But all of a sudden, when the world turned crazy, people had wild ideas, and we learned real quick that wasn't true for everyone that we were in alignment with. And you want to know, you want to know that the people that you're doing ministry with and that are building the church leadership-wise, you want to know they're in alignment with you. There needs to be a process of discussing, sharing, compelling people, I guess, to get there. So thank you for that. That was great. Okay, we're gonna switch gears and talk about people. You need people, certain kinds of people on your team, and if you're gonna build a healthy, strong team, and there are 5 types of leaders that you need on every team. 5 types of roles, if you will. Different roles, same goal is the focus. But I would say that this is often where we struggle the most, is we just presume that if we have warm bodies and they're doing great, then we're good to go. So I'm gonna go through with you the 5 types of leaders, and this was tremendous for me. This really changed things for how I saw our teams moving forward. Pastor Kevin shared this with us earlier this last year, and here they are, the leader of leaders. You gotta have a leader of leaders. And those people, their role is to lead multiple team leaders. They need to be up in the helicopter. If that leader of leaders is an extreme doer, you're gonna be in real trouble real quick. Because when the football team is out on the field, if the coach leaves the sidelines and runs in on a play to try to help out the quarterback, the other 10 players got nobody to talk to and no one to look to on the sidelines. So you gotta have a leader of leaders that can stay focused on the big picture. And then you need to have team leaders. You need to have those whose role is to lead a team of leaders who together lead a team. So you need the players, so to speak. You need the offensive coordinators, the defensive coordinators. And you need organizing leaders, those whose role is to lead by keeping the team informed, updated, and organized. I think we get in so much trouble by not having organizing leaders. We've got passion, we are excited, we've got vision, we know where we're going. You can rally people and get a bunch of people in a room, and then y'all just look at each other because we're not really sure what we're gonna do next. But hey, we're excited and something's gonna happen. Woo! That's right. I often say it's the organizing leaders that actually really are leading the church, because behind the scenes, they're keeping all the rest of us with vision and everything else on track. How are we gonna make it happen? We need culture leaders. We need leaders whose role is to lead an excellent, life-giving culture within the team. Here's culture. Culture is the way we do things. Now, Pastor Jason at Coast Life, they've got an amazing culture. Pastor Dan, he has an amazing culture at his church. And can I tell you, we believe we have a great culture going at Champion Center too, and they are not the same. The way we do things is different. But the people who are serving on your teams, especially if they're leading on your teams, they've got to know this is the way we do this. When we say details matter, we mean it at Champion Center. We've had some interns who have been joining us for the summer, and we invited them into one of our meetings where we were discussing our service production on the weekend. And we had a conversation about QR codes on the screens, and are they truly accessible to people? Because if I'm sitting over here and I have a band member or a vocalist in my way, and you're telling me to scan a QR code, I can't scan that QR code. And how many guests want to do this for the first time? And scan their QR code, and they're now just telling everybody around them, I might be the guest. Not every guest is going to do that. So we had a conversation about it, and I asked the interns after the conversation, like, what'd you learn from this conversation in this meeting? Is there something that stuck out to you? And this one young man, he's about 17 years old, and he goes, you guys talk all the time about how details matter, and he goes, I believe you now. You're having conversations about the person who's sitting in the seat and can they scan a QR code? What are we doing? We're establishing culture in the way that we do things. And then finally, we have informal leaders. And those people are people who lead without a role or a title. They lead by example. They mentor and encourage others on the team. They are the glue that holds the team together. Here's what I know about informal leaders. If you put them on your planning center and schedule them, they're going to all of a sudden not be the amazing leader that you just had 5 minutes ago. They float and flow throughout the experiences. We have a gentleman in our church. His name is Dave Rich. He's on our legacy team. He's ran businesses for himself, and he's like, I said, Dave, could you just help me out? When guests come in the lobby, we got this lobby host team, and I really would love for you to be a part of this lobby host team. And he goes, do I have to go to a meeting? Are you guys gonna have me do I have to sign something and do something? I gotta show up. And I'm like, no, just I just need you to greet people, Dave. I'm like, you have been here forever. You know when an unfamiliar face walks through the room. What I'm not saying to Dave is you can't lead because you're not answering your planning center request. What I am saying is, Dave, I need you, and in an informal way, can you be present in the lobby and gather other people to be present around you? And let's just love on some people that are coming through the doors. So it's an evaluation tool. We do something called Rooted here. And I asked a gentleman who is a Boeing engineer, retired, to run our Rooted program. I'm telling you what, it was the best looking spreadsheet I have ever seen in my life. It looks so good. I had such high hopes. And then the moment came. In fact, he and I just had this conversation because Rooted's happening again this fall. And he goes, do you remember when I first took over Rooted, how I was running around doing everything? I said, I sure do. So what did I do? I didn't just nix the guy because the one time that he ran Rooted, he did it very poorly and without a team. I sat down with him. I said, let's talk through the 5 types of leaders. Who are you missing to come alongside of you? And now we have this beautiful spreadsheet that has actual names next to the culture leader. I need to know the Boeing engineer is not the guy who's setting the atmosphere in the room, okay? But he'll do a real good job making sure that all the details are covered.
Was it a very nerdy culture? Engineer kind of nerdy?
If it even had a culture. I mean, It was kind of just lacking altogether. Yes. It was very task-oriented. That's how I would describe it. It was task. For him, the goal was just marking something off a list and doing the task. And for me, the goal is no, when someone comes to Rooted, I want them to know that they feel loved, that they're connected, that they have relationships. And so I would encourage you, use the tool. If you want the right people on your teams and you want to build teams that build the church, you got to have right people in right places. Do not ask an organizing leader potentially to be your culture leader. Sometimes you get a unicorn. It's very rare. But sometimes you get a unicorn that can do both. Typically not. Typically your culture leader are your outgoing, friendly, loving people, and they need the organizing leader to say, hey, it's time to start Rooted. It's time to get this going. People have been sitting here for a while. And oh, by the way, there's lunch and there's this and there's that. And so it's a partnership with all of the different roles. So you gotta have right people, right places. Pastor Dan, would you wrap us up with the coaching?
Yeah, can I talk about the bus, being on the bus? You got all these different culture leader and, roles change, and sometimes people, they go from being an informal leader to being, moving around. I was just thinking, this room's probably not full of many lead pastors because they all went to hear about money. Am I right? Is there any lead pastors in here? A few. Okay, there's a few. So the rest of us we're on the bus. We're not the driver of the bus necessarily. Few drivers are in here. And I just want to encourage you, just make sure you stay on the bus, and maybe your role changes, your seat on the bus changes. That's an old illustration from a book called Good to Great. And you might see that there's a gap in one of these roles that Nichole's talking about. Like, we don't really have an organizational leader. I think I need to help fill that until we have that person. And just, it's back to see need, meet a need. And I'm sitting looking at some of my team that's here. They're the hyper organized ones. They're like, it's time you're going to be late. They have spreadsheets, and it brings me peace. I don't know how to run the spreadsheet, but they have them. If they don't have them, I'm nervous.
Right.
Like if you see your church is missing the spreadsheet person, start figuring out how to make a spreadsheet for your pastor, and then try to find somebody to get in that seat, and so you can get back out of it. Right. There was a time that Paige and I, we went from youth ministry, 13 years in youth ministry, and we asked our pastor, what's your biggest headache? Yeah. And he said, the nursery. And so in my mind, I got demoted. 13 years of serving the Lord to now in charge of the dirty diapers. But it was his head. It was a hole in the bus. There was a seat that wasn't full. Well, it was full. It was full of stuff. Yeah.
It was really full of stuff.
It was full. But be willing. I just would ask you to be willing to fill those gaps. If it's culture, you may not be naturally good at that, but try to fill whatever that gap may be. And that really helps the whole church be a gap filler when it comes to leadership.
It makes me think of a gal who is an organizing leader for us. She's a lawyer. She works here on base, and she came to me recently and said, I want to say thank you for having a way for me to serve my church. She said, I've been a part of churches in the past, and if I didn't have an outgoing, real gregarious type personality she's like, if I didn't have that, where would I serve? Or if I didn't serve in kids, where would I serve? And she went down the list, and she said, the fact that you have created a space where I can put my organizing lawyer hat to work, and you know what we have her doing? She's what we call the experience owner of our production. That gal on a Sunday morning is running our whole service flow. We do a run through before we actually do our service. She's taking notes. She's got it down to a specific science. She's giving feedback, and she's so thrilled to be able to use her skill. And so are we. She didn't go to law school just to do the thing in the courtroom. She went to law school and is able to use all of her detail here for us at the church. So there's people on all of these roles. Yeah. So yes, finding your seat on the bus. Right. And she started out as a greeter, which made me think of that. Started out as a greeter. She's like, this is not for me.
I don't like people.
I don't. I'm done after 4 people. I think you need to find somebody else. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. One of the things that I was wanting to make sure we kind of all absorb is Pastor Nichole mentioned how our 3 churches all have 3 different cultures. We also have 3 different leadership training environments. Yes. The way we train leaders systematically is all different. We have one, it's 8 weeks long. It has 2 retreats, one at the beginning, one at the end. And it's like an 8-week leadership boot camp. And we call it Advance. You guys have a program?
Yep, it's 8 weeks long.
8 weeks long.
And we do it on Monday nights. We ask people to commit to the full 8 weeks. They're allowed to miss 1 session. But we also provide all that online for them in case they miss. But it's 8 weeks. And at the end of those 8 weeks, we celebrate huge for graduating from our leadership development. Yeah.
Jason has a leadership college
We do 10 weeks, and we have Leadership Track 1.0, Leadership Track 2.0, an initial orientation into leadership, and then as leaders are rising in our church, then we take them through Leadership 2.0.
It's like a college.
Which is a little more robust on some key topics. We do it on Tuesday nights, and this is really important, especially if you do small group ministry. We don't allow small groups on Tuesday nights. You can run small groups any other time you want, but you can't have Tuesday night because we don't want our groups ministry to compete with our team. And people shouldn't be put in the position of, if I'm a part of this ministry in the church, well, now my team is doing a team night or we're doing a leadership night and I can't be a part of it. And so we make sure nothing competes with the serve team that we have so that they can be on a serve team, be a leader, and still be a part of whatever else is going on in the church.
That's great. So 3 different ways of doing it. We're just putting stuff out here today that maybe you can grab on and figure out what's for your church. And there's not one way. We're not trying to present the one way that's the team church way. We all learn and glean from each other and take the meat and spit out the bones for our churches. So we've talked a lot about the systematic side. Now let's flip the coin over and talk about the organic side. And that's the never-ending coaching. You can have an 8-week process, but at the end of 8 weeks, someone's not a leader.
Yeah.
We lie to them. We tell them they're leaders now.
Yeah.
We give them a baton. We're trying to help them believe that they're leaders, see themselves as leaders, right? Everybody tracking with me? But the process isn't over. And so we need both the systematic and the natural organic coaching. For several years in a church that we were a part of in Memphis, people would call me Coach Pastor Dan. And I would take that as a badge of honor. And I hope all of you, if you're leading a team, that you see yourself as a coach. If you don't see yourself as a coach, you won't coach. Wow. You won't fulfill the role of a coach. What is the purpose of a coach? What's the purpose of coaching? To bring about the latent strength that's inside of the team, to call the team to winning, to train, to develop, to see the potential in someone and bring that potential forth, right? So if you and I don't see ourselves as coaches, we won't coach and we won't build people up. And so we're trying to build teams that build the church. How do we do that? Through coaching. And I played a lot of sports. I mentioned that. I had some really good coaches and some really bad ones. I want to be the good coach, right? So I want to encourage you to make sure you take your player jersey off and put your coach's whistle on and get your clipboard out and make sure you're not playing in a league you're supposed to be coaching in. So, for example, if I told you I play in a Saturday morning soccer league, I average somewhere between 7 and 10 goals every Saturday morning.
You do?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hypothetical.
You might be impressed until I tell you it's a 5 to 10-year-old boys league. And then you go from being impressed to concerned. Something's wrong with him. If I didn't get off the field, someone would probably come to try to remove me from the field. And then if that didn't work, we would probably make a phone call to the police. Many of us we're thinking we're really good players because we're playing in leagues we don't belong in. We belong coaching that league. Find a bigger league that you should be playing in. So some of us need to take off the jersey and put the whistle around our neck and get our clipboard out and become coaches. And that's a never-ending process. So some of us, like myself, I'm more naturally bent towards organic coaching, just all the time, real time, never take a break from it. And Pastor Jason's more wired towards systematic. You can kind of see maybe that a little bit today. Pastor Nichole, you brought up a really good question.
Yeah, what's your lean? Because if you don't know what your lean is, then we need both. We need the coaching and we need the systems. And we don't really get a pass on either one of those,
right.
But we have a natural lean. And if you aren't aware of your natural lean, then you're going to think all of it has to be done with your lean, so to speak. Because coaching's great, but you still have to have systems. You still have to have structure. And the same is true. You can have systems all day long, but if you don't love people and you're not coaching them, nobody wants to play with your systems. Nobody wants to do it, And I natural lean for me, I think, is definitely systems. I was a middle school teacher for years before I went into ministry. And so I'll tell you what, 14-year-olds will eat you alive if you don't have systems.
Structure.
I do believe that my time in the classroom prepared me for ministry like no other. I'm like, if you can win a 14-year-old over with U.S. history, I think you can do just about anything in life. Like, get them interested. But the point is, like, systems, yes, but at the same time, I've had to develop the skill of coaching. So it's probably now a little bit more my lean is coaching, because I understand that my role is to be a leader of leaders. And if I'm gonna be a leader of leaders, I somebody down here is handling the systems. Good. I gotta be the one who's out front coaching, so yeah.
So the coaching process is very personal. Yeah. We used to, would say, Coach got in my face. That sounds very personal, doesn't it? When Jesus started his leadership development, team building, how did he start? Follow me. Does that sound personal? We have a program called Advance. No. Follow me. The Apostle Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. Everybody say personal. So it has to be personal if we're going to coach and coach well. Pastor Gerald used to say, Pastor Kevin's dad, who was my pastor, he would use this term about developing leaders. And usually it was in a negative context. We would drive by someone's church who was struggling, and he'd say, Brother Dan, do you know what's wrong with that church? And I'd say, no. After a while, I knew the answer. He would say, they weren't sat on long enough. Have you ever been sat on by a leader? Some of you haven't. You need to go home and let your leader sit on you. He'd say they had some stuff in them that needed to get squeezed out. When I was 32, I was like, Pastor, can I get some oxygen? That's not a timeline. That's just letting someone impress who they are in the Lord on you. And doesn't that sound personal? It sounds personal. You're getting sat on. If someone sits on you, that's personal.
Very personal.
Right? And if you didn't hear today, the panel that was just up here, as they were talking, I could hear the cadence and the tone and the language of their lead pastors, knowing some of their lead pastors. And I haven't even met some. My wife leaned over and she goes, she sounds just like Alicia. I closed my eyes. I was like, oh my goodness. That's because they've been sat on. They have followed someone, not just a program. And their pastors have allowed them to follow them, and it got personal. And Jesus, just remember this, he took responsibility for their future. He didn't just say, follow me. He said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. So when it's personal, I'm making an investment. I hope my team would feel, my pastor's making enough investment in me. He doesn't want me to fail. He has an end goal. He can see who I can be, and he's going to lead me there. My pastors are going to help me get to where I'm supposed to be, who I'm supposed to be. We want our spiritual sons and daughters to win, right? And so hopefully that's exuded in the process. 2 Timothy chapter 2, we see the personal tone from Paul to Timothy. He said, you then, my son. So it's a family terminology, my son. Be strong in the grace that's in Jesus Christ, and the things that you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. He's like, I don't want the coaching to stop. Pick people, and this is just a little leadership nugget. Don't pour into people that you don't think, if they can't pass it on, you shouldn't be giving it to them according to the Bible. Don't let your gold go to people that are just going to keep it for themselves, and it's going to stop with them. So there's an expectation that we have this organic process. I'm going to teach you, and then you're going to teach other people. And that's how the kingdom can expand, our church can expand. And then he says, verse 3, join with me in suffering. So that's personal. And I want to encourage you to suffer with your pastors. Get in there. Don't be afraid of that, because a lot of times that's how you'll grow, is when you get to help carry the weight and carry the pain of the hardship. So it's very personal, the things you've heard me say. Deuteronomy chapter 6 talks about training up our children. So the organic side is like children. There's not a child program that's 8 weeks long to train up our children. It does not ever stop. We have kids. It doesn't feel like you ever get a break from it.
Even when they're grown and they're out of your house, right? Because no one tells you
we
that either.
We haven't experienced that yet, so.
Well, I'm just telling you, it's coming.
Yeah. So that's that, like, teach them while you go along the way, while you're in the church lobby, when you're in a car ride to Team Church Conference. Like, we never as leaders take a break from coaching, just like parents never get to take a break from parenting. And if we'll do that, here's what the Bible says, that we'll develop strong, reliable, capable people that we can actually build on. And that's what I'm wanting for my leader. I don't want flaky leaders. And there's a quote from the father of supercomputing. His name's Seymour Cray. He predates Bill Gates and all the Elon Musk. And he asked this question. He said, if you were plowing a field, which would you rather have? 2 strong oxen or 1,024 chickens? They both have the same amount of plowing strength. I know I don't want 1,024 leashes tied to a whole bunch of chickens. I'd rather have 2 strong oxen that I've trained, that have allowed themselves to be molded and can actually get something done for God. And we can all go in the same direction, amen? So that's the end result. If we're willing to do the coaching, have the sometimes tough conversations, the encouragement that needs to be given. If we're willing to do that, then there's a result that comes back to us, and it's the blessing of strong, capable leaders, reliable people who are able to build others also. So I've just got a short little list, rapid fire, of 7 things from the way Jesus trained and coached his team. 7 little things he did and 7 things he didn't do. Number 1, Jesus had a clear vision for the disciples' training, but he didn't give them a detailed plan of what it all included. There wasn't a list. There was no lobby, stand with brochures. There wasn't a website for them to get more information. Very little information. Are y'all tracking with me? Doesn't sound systematic to me. It sounds organic. Number 2, he did have a very quick onboarding process, but he didn't define how long the training process would last. Well, how long is this gonna be? Not sure. Just follow me. What does it cost? Everything. Leave your father and mother and sister for my name's sake, and I'll bless you. How many of you know Jesus had a good process? It was the organic process. Number 3, he didn't have specific classes, but he did give specific assignments. Very detailed assignments. So we're not afraid in an organic process to be giving out specific assignments. Number 4, he did grow impatient with them, but ultimately they grew and were able to succeed in birthing the church. I mean, at one point Jesus says to the disciples, how much longer am I gonna have to put up with you? You dull and unbelieving generation. He was frustrated with them because they weren't getting it. So if you're leading a team and you're frustrated, join Jesus. It's okay. Eventually they're gonna get it. Come on, was anybody else hard-headed and hard for your pastor to deal with? I'm raising my hand. I thank my pastor. Thank you for putting up with me. And I was young and I was foolish and I didn't know. I thought I knew more than I. Eventually we get it though. And the disciples got it too. So be patient. Everybody say be patient. Got to be patient with people. And big reminder, it takes time to build big giant oak trees. You can have weeds overnight. But if you want to build great leaders, you got to be patient with them. That it might take a decade. It might take 20 years. 30 years, who knows? But let's be patient, amen? Number 5, he didn't give out fancy titles, but he did demonstrate what servant leadership looked like. So organic, this means like, well, come with me. Let's just do this together. Let's help out. Let's be on a team and not worry that you have a title or not. Number 6, he did test them with difficult and impossible situations, and he allowed them to fail, but he didn't step in to rescue them and always fix things for them. Have to be willing to let people fail. Yep. One of the greatest things that Jesus did is he led by absenteeism. He said, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age, and he disappeared into the clouds. Doesn't feel like you're with me, Jesus. It feels like you left. Right? He said, tag, you guys are it, but I'm with you. Heart and soul, I'm with you. I mean, a heart and soul is not physical presence all the time. He didn't lead them. He didn't give them all the details. Sometimes he just wasn't available and they'd had to figure it out. Yeah. Sometimes they'd go and they'd try it out. We tried to cast out the demons and we said all the things that you say and it didn't work. Yeah. He's like, oh, really? It didn't go good, huh? Why don't you try again with some prayer and fasting, guys? You know, he let them fail. They learned, they grew, and they made a difference. Eventually, they turned the world upside down, right? They eventually got it. And then number 7, last one, he didn't tell them exactly where to go, but he did empower them with a broad mission and freedom after an extended time of relational training. He didn't give them all the details once again, but he just said, kind of generally, go into all the world. Where exactly? You figure that out. And so I want to encourage you in your own relationship with your pastors to embrace the ambiguous, embrace the absenteeism, and rise up and fill those areas in. And don't be nervous to go for it. And your pastor will let you know if you're off or not. So just few thoughts about the organic side of developing leaders.
We have some time allotted for question and answers. So if there's something that we've talked about today, or maybe not, and it's around the subject of building teams and building leaders that build the church, we're going to have someone with a microphone that's going to come around, be able to ask some questions if you'd like here in a little bit.
We're not in a hurry. We saved 30 minutes.
I know. We're good. We're efficient. Yeah. I was thinking about what you said, though, just a moment ago. You were talking about and go into all the world. I think that was probably my greatest challenge in leadership, is that I like the details. And in fact, I've learned a lot about my personality profile. You know, you take those tests and learn things, and it says you should never work in a job where you don't have clear parameters. And I said, see, I should never have been in ministry from the get-go, because
Mine says don't be in an environment where it's boring routines.
Yeah.
Seek out challenging environments.
Challenging environments. Mm-hmm. Well, you got it, brother. You got a challenging environment.
I have people that love the boring.
Yeah, but you have to embrace some of the boring. I think that's the whole point of our conversation today, is that there's the holistic view of building teams means you've got to do the nitty gritty. Yep. You got to have the spreadsheet, so to speak, the systems, the on-ramps, the exit ramps too. We didn't talk a lot about that. I think you mentioned it a bit with the seats on the bus. We've got to give people opportunities to move off of teams where they don't belong as well as the same way that we do. I know for...
Is that the back door of the bus?
Yeah. Emergency exit only.
Emergency exit.
I have a feeling you would have been sitting in the back of the bus. The party kids in the back of the bus. You mentioned about some of the gaps that we have when we go from assimilation, moving from people to being and attending, like whatever, our growth track, our starting point. For us, we call it Church Essentials. And we found that we probably had about 50% of the people that were walking through our system of our Church Essentials. About 50% of them were finding themselves onto team. So what happened to everybody else who once upon a time sat in a service and said, that's me, I want to join the team? Well, we had to take a hard look at all of the things. Sometimes it wasn't on them, sometimes it was on us. They would come to a team and they'd have a shadow experience, and it would be so miserable for them. They're like, yeah, if this is serving on a team, forget that, I'm not coming back again.
Wow.
And so, or they maybe said, yeah, working in kids sounds amazing. Or actually for us, it's more ushers. I'd love to be an usher. And I'm telling you what, it's a rough crowd sometimes on Sunday morning. People do not want to do what you're asking them to do. And they give you attitude. They give you all kinds of things. You're like,
this section is closed.
Yeah, well, no, that's where I always sit, don't you know? So we've had people who shadow for ushers and say, yeah, no, this one's not for me. But what we didn't have was a way for them to communicate that without making the person that they don't want to serve on their team feel bad.
Wow.
Because more often than not, they wouldn't go to them and say, yeah, this ushers team is not for me. They would just not show up.
Fade out.
They would not respond to the planning center request. And so we developed a team of connect coaches, we call them. And those connect coaches now, when you go through our Church Essentials, you're immediately paired up with one of them. They know you personally. They call you on the phone. They help you do the shadow experience. They follow up with you after the shadow experience to see if that's what you really enjoyed doing. And if not, they're the person that you can turn to that's, a safer person maybe than the one that you don't want to tell them, I don't like your team and I don't really like you. Maybe it's you. I just don't like you and your personality at the end of the day. But it's true. And so we have found that our success rate has jumped we're just right around 90%. 90% of the people that go through our Church Essentials are now finding their home on team. But it often doesn't happen the very next month, just so you know. It's usually about a 6-month process for a lot of people to walk
really
through
helpful.
the shadow experience, move things around. So,
That's
really
why you
helpful.
can't let them fall through the gap.
sorry, you said, say that again.
That's why you can't let them fall through the gap. Because it's not they're going to go week 1, week 2, week 3, bam, they're fully engaged on team.
Right.
Really
They're going to
good.
hit a week and then they're gone and then they're coming back. So they're months, sometimes 90 days getting
Right.
through the assimilation process and then getting on team. That's why you just got to have intentional eyes through the whole process and just keep pastoring people forward into
That's
their
right.
into their purpose.
That's right. Get some organizing leaders with all your color coding and the things behind the scenes. Are there any questions out in the audience for us? I see a couple hands over here. Do we have a person who's got a microphone who could help us with that? Shanna's working on it. There we go. Yay.
I have a system question. For attendance, how do you track your weekend attendance? I was interested in that 40% actively attenders are serving. So serving is easier to track in planning center, but attendance, how do you track your church attendance? I mean, when you have 100, 200 people, you can probably iron them, but when you have more, how?
You need a system. No, I'm just messing with you. We have a system. It's a complicated system, but every kid's room, there's a team that tracks that. There's people that have assignments. We have a specific point in the service where we count the auditorium because people don't get to church on time, and we're not counting during the first song. Amen, everybody? Not counting that. That's not our attendance.
No, we don't
That's
count that
hilarious.
We're like solidly 30 minutes into I don't know all the details anymore, but there's a certain point where we know the room is at full. The hosts are going to count the room. The kids team is going to count the kids. We're going to get serve team because serve team's going to check in. They're going to wear a name badge. There's a lot to that there's more conversation to be had, but we're going to have our kids are going to get checked in. So that's an easy way. We use a planning center. We use planning center for our team, and then we count the auditorium, and then we just track it in a spreadsheet and track our total average attendance for the month, how many people served that month, and then it'll give us our percentage on how many are active on our team.
I just found out from your executive pastor, it's 30 minutes into the service when everyone's sat down.
We do our count right when Pastor Kevin starts, right as he gets ready to speak. Then we're like, everyone's settled, and we take our count.
You know what's amazing being up here on the panel? I'm like telling my team to write that down. Like I'm learning. Isn't this awesome? Like we're all learning from each other. Like how they do things. I'm like, do we do that? How do we do that? I'm sitting up here thinking about all kinds of stuff. It's so good. Good question.
Great. Another question?
Yep, right here on the front row. C-Pace.
What sort of a spiritual formation process do you have, like either incorporated within or alongside your simulation process to make sure that your leaders are growing spiritually as well as practically as leaders?
This is coming from Pastor Pace Hartfield's son who just graduated
Maybe
from
he should
college
start by
and is
telling us.
building a
Yes. spiritual
spiritual formation process for their whole church. Very wise and astute young man.
So we're going to use assimilation as part of our spiritual formation. The goal is to get them connected into community. As we see faithfulness, we'll bring them further into leadership track where we'll start to form theology. Practically what we did was for a while there, we were not having conversations that needed to be had. And so week 1 for us is about who we are as a church. Here's our mission, here's our vision, here's our values of what we value as a church. Here's our strategy on how we serve people. And then week 2 is theology. We go through, because one of the key things that I got tired of doing
is we use phrases like welcome home, hey everybody, welcome home, you belong here. You know, we use all these phrases and people will just come to a church and join a church and not really know what the church believes. And then we find out later, you know, they're invested in the church and they find out later that we have some theology that they don't agree with. And I just believe it's a kindness we can do people to go, hey, we're not gonna wait to have that conversation. We're gonna have that conversation early. And I want you to know up front who we are. And so we go into from basic Bible theology to some social hot topics. We don't delve into all of them that we would do in our leadership track. But we go through some key things that before people put roots down in our church, I want them to know up front who we are. And then the third part of it, which is where Church Essentials on the ecosystem can help, is we take them through. Many people have never had a spiritual gifts assessment, or some people don't even know they have spiritual gifts. Like if you're really reaching people that haven't been planted in church, they don't even know that God wired them and wired them for acts of service to glorify his name. And so part of their formation is helping them understand that God has indeed given them spiritual giftings. It's gonna help point them towards the team that we want them to get on. And then we're gonna do life on life. Leaders are gonna speak into them, challenge them. We're gonna get them in groups where group leaders can help form their spiritual development. And then, we, you know, obviously from Sunday on the pulpit, we wanna be an equipping church, like resourcing people with the word of God. But that's the overall strategy for us.
For us, it'd be life groups that meet weekly within the context of relationship. And our life groups are all centered around the weekend message. So we go from hearing it in the temple courts to now going house to house and doing life together, rubbing shoulders with each other. And then we also have what we call Grace Life U, which are classes. They're not small groups, they're just classes. And so those kind of two things would be the kind of relational and then classes, you know, in addition to that.
I actually think we do both. We probably, you know, systems, I follow a little bit more along this line. Rooted is a big one for us. If you have not even gone through our Church Essentials, we encourage everyone in our church to go through Rooted and have the Rooted experience because it's just so foundational. And we actually encourage them to do it more than once as well. It's like, you know, you look at these NBA basketball players, they still have to practice the fundamentals.
Yep.
They go in and they shoot, and they keep shooting and they keep shooting. It's no different for us with our faith in Christ. So
and Celebrate Recovery.
And we do have
Celebrate Recovery is another big one for us of discipleship. It's really discipleship.
Yep. Yeah. Great question.
Yes. We can't wait to see what you build.
Yeah.
And come
then
share
pass
with
it on.
us in a few years. It's going to be amazing.
Okay, we got another question. I see a hand over here. I saw a hand over there as well.
See how
Good
fast
luck,
you can
Shanna.
run.
Good luck.
It's a big room.
I'll tell you what, if you have a question, would you just come sit right up here in the front row? We got a bunch of empty seats, and that'll save us some time. We get more. If anybody else has a question, just come right on up here and sit right in the front. That'll help us. We'll get some more rapid fire. Thank you.
Is it working?
Let's go ahead and shout it out. See if we can hear you. Something's wrong with the mic.
Hello, here we go. Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to ask a question about burnout. How do we make sure volunteers don't burn out in a church context? Because I've talked to people many times. You ask someone to volunteer many times, at some point they are tired and they burn out and they don't want to serve anymore. How, as a team leader, do we make sure? Because some people just say yes all the time. When you ask them to serve, they say yes and yes and yes. And at some point, they just get burned out and tired. So how do we make sure as a team leader, when we ask people to serve, we don't get them to the point where they burn out?
So burnout's tricky. One is I don't think people burn out so much over how much time they commit. It's amazing how much time we can pour into things we love. I think people more burn out over being forced into things that maybe they don't have a natural gifting for. Or their ambition has taken them further than their gifting. So I think having accurate eyes on where we place people and putting them at the appropriate level
So what happens is people just want to climb the ladder, or we see somebody who's faithful and we elevate them to leadership and they just don't have the gifting for it. Because when you have a passion for something, like you're gonna pour your heart into it. And then I do think on the back end, there does need to be some pastoral care. Like we need to care for our team. Leaders need to have eyes on how to care for team. So we set a standard and then we go, hey, we're gonna sit one, serve one. And then that's like, there's the people that are like, well, I don't have anything to do today, I'll serve all day. And we'll just step in and be like, no, you're taking spots from somebody else. Like there's somebody else that needs to be on that team and have that spot. So we're also gonna have eyes on the other end, that it's not just a handful of people running around making everything happen. We're gonna look at the health of the team. Are we proper? If you're, I'm talking, we've run multiple services since Genesis. I think we've run multiple services a long time. So I think it looks like, practically it looks like rotations. So we're gonna have an A-B schedule. We're gonna have somebody, A-B, they're gonna serve a week, they're gonna be off a week. I'm getting into things, the only caveat that we put to that is we don't do that in kids ministry. Kids ministry is a higher expectation, because we don't want kids to come in and see a different face. We want that kid to come in and see the same face caring for them week after week after week. And so if you're gonna serve in our kids ministry, then you really need to have a passion for it, because we're gonna put a little bit different expectation. But I get burnout, but I'm talking to people in this room who pour heart and soul in every Sunday, and we gotta take care of our hearts. I think a lot of burnout is more about gifting, placement, and spiritual health. We need to teach people how to take care of their spiritual health, because if you're full of the Holy Spirit, God will empower you to do the things that He's called you to do.
Great.
Awesome.
Another question?
We got a bunch of
we got some on the
people
front
right here
row
on the
over
front
here. Okay, here we go. Fire
Mr.
away.
Purple shirt. Oh, no.
Okay, my question is twofold, because I did text them both in, but you just mentioned kids ministry and a higher standard. If you are in a church where you have a lot of new people and you have a certain standard that you're trying to meet in a kids ministry, would you not launch that ministry or not have that ministry at certain service times because you don't have that team? Like, would you, as a lead pastor, pause the ministry until you can train people to that, you can make sure people are meeting that standard that you need in that ministry? And then the second one was just coaching. Who is eligible to receive your coaching? Like, what are your requirements? Because if staff roles are changing, not frequently, but enough that the reason I'm coaching someone is because they were under the area that I am leading, and then all of a sudden my role has changed. Like, am I still supposed to coach that person? Like, we're talking mega church setting, so. But I think the standard one for me is like the most important.
I think as like lead pastor, you know, you have to pick who I'm coaching. I want to coach everybody all the time. Pastor Kevin encouraged me one time about that my arm strength had grown and I didn't know it, and my hammer size had gotten larger and I didn't know it. And he said, you used to be able to kind of tap that nail in. He said, now you need to be careful, because you might destroy the whole thing, because when you swing now, you think you're Dan, the 22-year-old youth leader, but now you're not that young youth leader anymore. You have much more authority and weight and boom, and you can destroy somebody. So, you know, I try to be conscious of that. Our executive assistant, Jordan's right here. She stands next to me just about all weekend gatherings. So if it's on the weekend, and I call her my punching bag. And I will punch Jordan, so to speak, like, why is the usher seating first-time guests on the front row in the third song? You know, like, I'm gonna let her know, and she'll calm me down, and then she'll go punch the usher leader, who goes and punches the usher. From it's like palatable by then and grace-filled. But I've got to be able to get that frustration out. Like, we can't keep doing this. This is wrong. She can take it, disseminate it. And because she's been next to us for almost 6 years now, sometimes I will start to turn towards her and she'll say, it's okay. I'm already texting them, or, whatever. And so that helps me, but I'm not going to stop coaching. There's no boundary to me as the lead pastor. I can walk through kids ministry and say, why isn't the leader here at the door? Why are they throwing balls and it's chaos in this kid's room right now? We need order when the parents are coming. I'll do that because it's my church and I'm responsible for every area, and it's not compartmentalized for myself or my wife as the lead pastors. It's our church. We can coach anybody, but I would just say I try to have a filter. Do I need to be the one doing this? And sometimes I'm in the middle of it thinking, I'm crushing this person. This parking lot guy can't handle my level of enthusiasm and passion right now. And I'm like, this guy he thinks I'm a crazy pastor now that I care. Does that make sense? So
I think timing matters too.
You're a master of that.
I think timing really matters. I used to fire off text messages and during a service, if you will, and then I had to really get honest with myself. I'm not going to rattle the person who's about to come up here and share on the platform, because I'm like, dang, I don't want them to be worried now about the coaching moment that I know if it's not mission critical to the next service. Let's just put it that way. Let's say something that they did was, I really like them to say it a different way or have a different approach. If it's not mission critical for the next service, I'm probably going to hold that back and let that be an after Sunday follow up with them. But if it's something that's really going to negatively impact the service experience for our guests, for our church family, then I'm going to have to say it in the moment. So I think it also too matters what you're describing. Sometimes it's timing, knowing when to say it. And you had your second part of your question was about Kids ministry.
Standards, like if you have a lot of newcomers and you need bodies in rooms.
Yeah, right.
But you don't want to just put bodies in rooms in a kids ministry.
Right.
Would you be okay with pausing that? Like if we have 3 services, would you not offer childcare at one service because you don't have enough of the mature people that meet the standard?
I think you can be okay with it not being the same all the time. You have what you have, you do your best with what you have, and God gives you more. So some services you may not be able to. There was a time, the church we were part of in Memphis, where on Saturday night we had, this 5th and 6th grade ministry. If you came to the 8:30 the next morning, it's 1st through 6th grade together, and that's okay to have some and not another. Better to do it with excellence. So I would say there's something else to consider. There's pioneer mode, and then there's your established mode. So like church planners are like, you're a leader. Thank you for coming to cookie exchange night, coffee night. We now have a board member. Have you been baptized? Yes. Which way? Doesn't matter. We sprinkle, that's pioneer mode. But I think as you grow and you strengthen, then what you could tolerate in pioneer mode, you may not be able to tolerate anymore. There's more at stake. The consequences are higher. So I would encourage you to filter that out for yourself. There's a lot of things right now we don't have in our church that I want to have. We're not there yet.
You could also use that to compel people to joining the team and growing that, so that we have to sometimes combine, here, we don't have enough qualified people. And so we're going to move 2 classrooms together, and we're like compelling the people who are utilizing that classroom. Hey, we'd really love to have this open for you.
Great,
would you consider serving just one weekend a month with us? We'd love to train you, get you ready to go, and set you on your way.
During COVID, we didn't get enough workers back for opening kids ministry. And I threatened to shut down the coffee ministry. What she's saying, you're not gonna have coffee anymore, and I'm gonna go downstairs with the kids, and you won't have me either. And then our founding pastors are here, Pastor Randy and Mary Jo, to honor them. They were some of the first people to sign up to go down to kids ministry to get it back. But it was out of what Nichole said, we don't have enough, kind of wave the flag, it ain't working. We got to do something. It's what Nichole said, and now we have enough. So,
if it's adding multiple services, at no point in our journey of all the services we've added over the years have we had enough kids on the serve team members to launch the services. So we will we'll do an ask and say, for the next 90 days, can you take 2 services? And we'll tell our leaders, you got 90 days to get people trained up, ready to go, to step into that place, because we've got people that made a 90-day commitment, and we're gonna lean on them. We're gonna lean on them a little heavy for the next 90 days, but we're gonna put a stop point to it. and then get them there. I love the pioneer mode, like just culture, get the playbooks ready, get strong orientation, and then just start building, because at some point you just got to build the capacity that you need to get to where you want to go. And providing kids ministry is one of the catalysts to being able to expand the churches. I mean, as we heard today, it's like thinking three is going to be powerful to help you grow.
We got another question?
Yes. When you were talking about the organic leadership and that list, is there a way to measure, when you talked about, bringing them in and then connecting them and then building a relationship with them, the whole organic process, is there a way to measure how people are growing in relationship?
I mean, I think so. Are you talking about growing in their leadership? Is there a way to measure that? I would
more relational.
A relational measurement?
Yeah.
I mean, submission's a big test. Jesus gave impromptu submission to authority tests. Pastor Gerald used to tell us that your level of submission to authority is never tested when you agree. It's only tested when you don't agree. And your willingness to surrender to the Lord is out of how much He loves you. And we know the Lord loves us, so we want to submit. And I think when there's a deep relationship, it may be hard, but I think that would be a test to see someone's maturity in a discipleship process. What's their willingness in being submitted to authority when they disagree? I think a loyalty test when people are leaving. Jesus asked the question, another test, are you going to leave also? Right. Things aren't going great in the church, like, do you stay? For Paige and I, we will meet people that will come to our church, and we find out how many years they've been in another church. And that will speak to us because, it was hard for them, it was difficult for them to leave. And they'll talk about that anxiety, and immediately our trust level starts to go up in them because they pass these tests of time and loyalty, submission to authority. I think those would be some things
and motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? We recently had to ask somebody to take a step back. To say, we see all these areas and you're serving and the burnout was real, and we just want you to take a step back and just come for a while and receive. And that really brought up some things that we were like, whoa, if you can't release the areas where you're leading, when your pastor's saying you need to take a step back, you're holding on to those things for all the wrong reasons, and they're fulfilling some things on the inside of you, and that's not good. It's not good for you, and it's not good for the team that you're leading. And so sometimes saying no to someone can be a really great way to test motivation of why they're doing what they're doing too.
Or you could ask them to paint the fence.
You could ask them to paint the fence.
If they paint the fence quickly with a joyful attitude, they're probably growing.
Change it up, ask them to do something outside the scope. I love that. Yeah,
awesome.
Question?
Well, I think you guys have already answered all my questions. It was just about people who seem to be burnt out, or leaders that aren't actively leading. Maybe they feel like they're a leader, but they're not actively leading. So I think you've already given us some really great tools on how to have that conversation if they need to get off the bus or not.
Yeah, good.
Are you talking like positional leaders? They have a title to lead, but they're not really leading?
Yeah, that maybe they're not they don't seem engaged, or so a lot of your pointers have kind of already answered my question.
Well, we can always go back to John Maxwell. Leadership is influence. And if someone, you don't need a title to lead anyone.
Sure.
And if you have to have a title to lead anyone and you're not leading, then you're really not the leader anyways. There's somebody else on the team that's leading. So I would move the title out quick and find another position on the bus. Send him to the back of the bus with Dan. He'll have a real good time.
Do you have any pointers on how to start that tough conversation?
How to start that difficult conversation?
Yes.
You say, my pastor in Memphis would say, this is probably going to be a difficult conversation. People would come I remember the first time I ever watched him fire someone. She walked in the room, I walked in with her and sat down. He said, this is probably going to be a difficult conversation. And she went, okay. And she kind of knew then, this is going to be, you just have to do it in love. Pastor Jim Simba said, you cry and pray over someone. I think that helps too. Prepare your heart.
Regarding your leadership pipelines, you guys mentioned your 10-week and your 8-week classes. Once they graduate those classes or that they graduate the 8-week program. What do you do with them? Where do you place them? Where do they go?
Our qualifications to get in is that you tithe, you pay $150, and you're already serving on a team. So there's not like we're going to place you now on a team. You should already have been on one. But we are going to have a conversation. What's your next step? Yeah. Is it to become a life group leader and you've never led a life group? Is it to kind of lead the 8:30 service of ushers and take on more responsibility? Because the gift of faithfulness is more responsibility. So it would be that kind of question. What's your next step to step into leadership? Right. Is it, that would be our process, like an exit type interview.
We started out with you, our first ask was of everyone who currently leads on a team. And we offered it twice in the year. And as every location pastor, we had a responsibility that anyone who was leading in any capacity at Champion Center had to go through LDP if they were going to continue to be in a leadership role. So we had to get everybody through that wanted to, and that was willing to continue to lead. Then the last time, Pastor, we've done it 3 times. The last time he decided, I got the text message on a Saturday night, hey, I've decided I'm gonna invite the whole church to come and be a part of LDP. I'm like, how many people are gonna show? I had that panicked moment, but here's what it did for us. I was shocked. I did not expect the volume of people to respond and want to come to be a part of LDP. I thought we'd be dwindling down and getting lower and lower in numbers. This is the 4th time we've offered it. But I gotta tell you, people that have gone through that process now, we have a personal follow-up with them. And it's the same thing. We got next steps for you, but we're gonna help coach you and guide you through that process. It used to be that I was trying to do all of it for Tacoma, and there was just so many people going through it, it was not realistic for me. Now I work through the directors of the different departments, and we together look at an evaluation tool that we have. All this you can find about on the website for the ecosystem. It's an evaluation tool, and they sit down and have a one-on-one meeting, and we talk about what's next step for you. And then that director also knows this is a person who's come through leadership development, and you can expect more from them. If you're already serving on a team, we're asking you to go from here to here. So let's say you've been a greeter at the door. That's great. Now, how about you lead a weekend team? So we're just asking for everyone to take one step up when it comes to that. So, all right. Thank you all for coming and being a part of our lab session. We hope it was beneficial and helpful to you.